Okay, my name is Dudgeon. I'm a research professor with the Transforming Indigenous Mental Health and Wellbeing research grant at the University of Western Australia. I'm also the director of the Centre for Best Practice in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander suicide prevention. I live and work in beautiful Noongar, that's Perth in Western Australia. But my people are Bardi people from the Kimberley. I have lived and worked in that lovely country for probably 2/3 of my life, and I'll probably stay there. I've been in the area for a very long time. My background is that I am a psychologist. I found out after I had graduated that I was the first Indigenous psychologist ever to graduate, and I'm really pleased I found out afterwards, because I think if I knew that while I was studying, I probably would have frozen with the responsibility and not completed. But I've been really pleased and proud to see, the emergence of a great number of Indigenous psychologists, but also to see psychology itself and mental health itself starting to change. So I think that I've witnessed some considerable change over the decades. Okay, our round table today, our meeting today was special. That was a gathering of Indigenous psychologists and mental health professionals, and we were fortunate that we had this day together. We'd come together for the big summit on self-harm that Black Dog Institute had hosted, because we're part of a Lancet Commission group of papers on self-harm across the world, and it does have an international focus. We were asked to do the Indigenous chapter, and when we were asked, it was important for us to ensure that we didn't speak for other Indigenous groups, because one of our issues and part of our history of colonisation is that we always are described or spoken about, and there's been no opportunity to speak for ourselves and our own realities, our own priorities, and what's important to us. So with that in mind, with that philosophical position of that we need to be self-determining to our people but other Indigenous peoples, we used our networks to pull together a really great group of Indigenous scholars in the area. So you've met them all in the other videos. If this is the first video you're watching, make sure you look at all the videos, viewers. So we were very pleased with our grouping. Not everyone came to the summit to talk about the first day we were talking about the chapters, or the pillars as they call them. The second day was the big public summit. And not all our people came, but a good amount of them. I think our author from Norway wasn't able to come, and a couple of the Australian ones, but the rest of us were here. And I think having an opportunity to speak to the issues that we wrote in the pillar was really fabulous. Also having as part of the proceedings, but also having our own workshop that afternoon with others talking was really important. So I think our presence has been very strong. I think that the others there really appreciated seeing us and the diversity of different thoughts we were able to present. I think, though, that the important thing is the commonalities that bring us together, that we were Indigenous people from what we call settler countries mainly. So it's Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States, where the colonisers have stayed in the country and become the dominant society. So part of our challenges has been to struggle to keep our own sovereignty intact and to rebuild that and to reclaim our culture, our knowledges and so on. So those are the things that we believe contribute that history that's only been starting to be spoken about and acknowledged in recent years, that contributes to our well-being or lack of well-being. And that has to be one of the important things that we do, start challenging that, reclaiming our culture, our healing ways, as well as taking the best of Western methods as well. So it's totally not excluding of that, but certainly to ensure that there's cultural perspectives for us. So I think that's the big commonality for all of us. That was certainly reflected in the pillar, but in all the presentations we did. I think coming together, presenting the webinar this morning was fabulous. I know that our audience was largely an Indigenous audience, and I think our Indigenous scholars were thrilled to bits to see that happen, and I hope that this is the first of many. For me, what I saw is all these fabulous ideas being presented, and I think that there was a great excitement from the speakers themselves, but also from the audience. The questions were absolutely, there were no negative questions. They were all, they were good questions. And I know that the Indigenous, the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander community were pretty excited as well. And I think there is this change happening. We're seeing paradigm shifts happening across all the disciplines, but particularly in mental health, we're seeing that happening, and we're a part of that. So I think there's a real hunger and appetite to have these conversations, and especially from different, to have such a span of different countries as well. So we're really pleased with it. And I think probably that's a good way to end, is to say that I think that our webinar, our authorship of the pillar, and our participation with the others in the awesome public summit that was held is a signal, if you like, of the paradigm change that is the shift that is occurring. That Indigenous knowledge is starting to take its place equally with Western science, and that what we have to offer is not just for our people, although obviously they're the priority, but through bringing up Indigenous knowledges, we'll be able to share that with non-Indigenous people as well. What inspires us is that I think when I was studying, I did anthropology as my minor, psychology was my major, and I probably would have ran off and done anthropology because that was the discipline which was more open to cultural difference, and they were using words like ethnocentrism, and they were kinder to other cultures. Psychology was very Western and very, it seemed to me at the time, judgmental. However, I was very fearful of changing disciplines because I was scared I wouldn't finish any, so I stuck to it, finished psychology. I did read this book as an undergraduate called Black Psychology, and that was written by African American psychologists. And for me, that was a really remarkable experience. It was like, the boundaries had broken down, and psychology and mental health could mean different things. It wasn't always this very limited Western conception. So I started in order to help people, and particularly my people. It was through my study, and then very much involved in working in Aboriginal organisations or departments within the university, and a commitment to social justice. So whatever I did needed to benefit my people, and At that time, psychology wasn't seen as so, well-being wasn't such a big issue overall in society, let alone for Indigenous people, but that has changed. Psychology and mental health weren't seen as big issues in our society, and particularly for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. I think that at that time, advancement was seen as more an economic advancement. Since then, however, we know, with all the mental measurements of Indigenous mental health and suicide, self-harm, that are culturally responsive and different mental health or psychology is now required. So I've seen the development of this new area, which really augurs well, not only for Indigenous people, but for mainstream as well. What's come out of today's webinar in particular is that we had good face-to-face discussions. We've been meeting off and on for a number of years now, and our New Zealand member is the one who's been bringing us together. But to meet face-to-face is a really great thing. All of us in the one room was fabulous. So we were able to have conversations, and we have made a commitment that we will build a website, that we will try to go to, common conferences. We will write papers, and we will formalise our network. So that's important. I think as Indigenous psychologists and mental health professionals, we do need our own group where we can feel safe and we don't have to be forever educating people. So we need to come together and have our own conversations, challenge each other, but in gentle and culturally appropriate ways. So that's a big step forward, I feel. And if this is all we had right now, that would be enough too. I think coming together was very important. Do go to universities, do study, but use your education, or whether you do go to universities or not, but use it to gain social justice. Indigenous rights and is one thing. We have a whole range of terrible inequities in our society, and I sometimes worry for our young people that they might be overwhelmed by that. But we can be a force for good change as well. So I'd say to young people, consider joining psychology or the mental health professional. It is changing. We're witnessing a considerable change. It is much more socially conscious than it has been. And I think that we young people will be a part of the big change that's required. There are other people like us out there as well. So I think our society, our world is changing. We've had COVID, we've had climate change, we've had, a war, social justice protests like Black Lives Matter and so on. And it is a turbulent time. It is a very turbulent time. But if we stay together with like-minded people and our commitment is to social justice, I think we're going to be okay. So that's what I'd say to the young people in my very garbled way. My hope for the future is that the things that we've spoken about, the challenges and very serious challenges as well, will be dealt with. My hope for the future is that all people are equal in their cultures as well. That if you're Indigenous, if you're of another culture, that you are given special room and space to occupy that identity, that is celebrated, that, because when we said, there should be a day recognising Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and others have said, well, what about a day for this or a day for that cultural group? Why not? We should recognise everyone. My hope for the future is that there won't be suicide or mental health problems, that we'll be wrapping around individuals, families and communities early, that the wisdom from Indigenous cultures is also available to non-Indigenous people, that if they need to take a camp back to bush and be one with nature for a time as part of their healing or replenishment, that they can do that. So I think I'd like to see a fusion of all the different strengths that each group has, and have that available for all the people. We talked during this period about the role of our cultural healers. That's very important, and I hope to see that, and the traditional cultural therapies are more prominent, not just for us, although for us in the first instance, but it's offered to all people. So I'd like to see a future where people can be the best they can be, but each culture is celebrated, and the best of those cultures are available for all the people.